Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Social Responsibility at Work podcast. I am your host, Angela Howard, CEO and founder of Call for Culture. And today I am joined by two good friends, Leesa and Jenna from Leader. Welcome to the podcast. We're very, very happy to have you here.
We're thrilled to be here.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And I would
Good to see you.
love to do just a few introductions. Leesa, you want to go first?
Yeah, happy to. So thank you, Angela. It's so great to be here. I'm Leesa Hill, as you mentioned, with Leader, and I wear two hats. I'm a partner of team effectiveness on Jenna's team and the work that we do there that Jenna can jump into for us. And then the other hat I wear is that I'm the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And that's both internal to our employees at Leader and then externally in terms of really forming the strategy and the offerings and solutions that we provide to our clients through the lens of DEIB.
Awesome. Thanks, Leesa. Jenna Cohen, as Leesa mentioned, I lead our team effectiveness practice here at Leader. My background is in the organization and leader effectiveness space over the past 20-ish years, cross industry, and have had the opportunity to work with many great leaders and teams along my journey. Our work at Leader, and I'm sure we'll get into this a bit too, is really focused on building and enhancing teams and healthy teams within organizations. And that has multiple dimensions to it, but really thinking about how people, humans, can really thrive in the workplace, what that means for teams and leaders and organizations to show up to them and for the individuals to show up to the organization so that, right, there's an opportunity for individual and collective impact in whatever the work is that they're doing and working towards. So really excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
Yes. And I just have to mention, the day that Jenna and I met, and Leesa came into the fold a little bit later, is like very clear in my brain. I remember we were at Transform, you know, we had met, through Dane and, some part of the universe brought us together. Right. And we were just like walking through the conference. And I remember the conversation we had in particular about this broader connection of healthy workplaces and healthy, like broader ecosystems and sustainability of those ecosystems. And I just like felt like I had a kindred soul that I had found. And it's always great to find your people who really understand this work. And I have found the work at Leader to be very much aligned to the work that we're doing at Call for Culture, and that we're not just focused on the organization as a container, but more so a mechanism for creating healthier people, healthier communities, a healthier world, a more sustainable world. There's kind of this ripple effect. And so, and you all are also sponsoring our Culture Impact Lab this year. Jenna, I know you're going to be leading a panel in particular on being well at work. So I figured we could just kind of like tease that out a little bit here on the podcast between the two of you, because Leesa, I think you bring a really fantastic perspective to this. And so I want to talk, and going back to your introduction, Jenna, around healthy teams, healthy organizations, you would assume the opposite of that. Someone might ask, well, like what's disrupting wellness at work? And so I would love, Jenna, maybe for you to kick it off, and Leesa will head to you next.
I think
I know it's a
that,
big one.
I mean, there's so many things, right? The the world that we occupy at the moment is complicated. And each of us is navigating that in our own way, in our own kind of mini worlds. And then we show up to work, right? And for some people, that work is filled with passion and commitment and like I wouldn't do anything else but. For other people, it's a means to financial stability and that's it, right? And maybe they're getting that and they're working their tails off, right? Despite it not necessarily having a strong sense of purpose or being part of who they are outside of that job, whatever hours it occupies in their days or evenings. So that is happening for everyone in every work experience that they're having. And then they're in community with these people to deliver on whatever it is they're delivering in whatever, bringing whatever skills, capabilities, technical expertise, knowledge, energy, time, etc., to do that. And I think when you think about healthy, that's also a personal thing, right? But there's a role that leaders, colleagues, organizational structures have to make that workplace be what it is. And there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
choices that go into that, as we all know, as HR practitioners can appreciate, as executives can appreciate, and as employees at all levels in the organization can appreciate. A lot of decisions and choices goes into where you work, but also what's set up in that space. When we think about teams, that is, from our perspective, something that I've come to as recently is that's like the unit of performance and impact for organizations, right? Yes, there are individual tasks that we complete, but very rarely are we truly operating solo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even a, a soloist musician has a team
Mm-hmm.
behind them, right?
Mm.
Or they're part of something else. So when you think about that and what it takes to have that team experience be healthy, things that we often talk about are connection, professional intimacy, appreciating where people might be coming from in the work that they're doing to a certain extent, right? But then also understanding what you are aligned and working towards and in how you're working towards that together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that alignment of purpose, that alignment of how you show up in your work, and through that, right, like that North Star and the
Mm-hmm.
how you're achieving those short and longer term objectives to have the impact that you're there to have. And that's true, I think, regardless of any industry or work context, right? That's happening for all of us. But we're showing up there first and foremost as individual humans who are working, who are operating within this broader context. Um, but when you do that work at the team level, a lot of magic can happen.
Mm. Lisa, what do you have to add?
So yes to everything, right? Yeah, yes
Ditto.
to that, and DEI as the wrapper around it, right? That
Mm-hmm.
right because with all of those things true that Jenna just talked through, you put difference into that space, no matter what that, whether it's what you can see or what you can't see, big buckets of demographics that we think about when we think about diversity and others, diversity of thought, diversity of experience, all of these things, certainly generational difference, right? All of these tentacles, right? And you wrap that around. It's not even just a wrapper. I mean, it's the thread from top to bottom with all of those intricacies that Jenna just talked about, and the experience of those individuals, same environment, can be wildly different, right? And it
Mhm.
can, dial up stress for somebody else. It can dial up burnout for someone else, right? And understanding, sort of the push pull of those things, and the role of the employer is varied, or or should it be varied, or and what is their
Mhm.
role, right? I know that's like something that we've talked about outside of this, but which is juicy though, right? What is the role of the employer to solve
Mhm.
for, in service of? And I think that's where I think that's the carve out, like in service of what, not just happy people, which we don't talk about enough at work, but that having happy, healthy, inclusive, resilient people and teams in service of the work, whatever that work is for that employer.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is a conversation I know we've had many times together, which is, to your point, Leesa, what is the responsibility of the employer in the context of, other systems, other support systems that are supposed to be functioning to do
Mhm.
similar things, right? We talk about happiness, wellness, cost of living, a living wage, all these things that perhaps other social support systems are supposed to be providing. But we're in an era right now where employers are either saying like, oh, not my problem, or they're stepping up and saying there are gaps. And as an
Right.
employer, as somebody who employs somebody and is, highly impacting lives, livelihoods, families, whole communities, that can have impact over generations.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like I am going to do what I can in the sphere of influence that I have. And oh, by the way, probably should be speaking up about these things, right? If you care about your people, you probably should have an understanding of what healthcare is like in this country,
Mhm.
and what that, you should probably have an
Yeah.
idea of, the labor movement and the fact that it's like still happening. I think people think the labor movement like died, decades ago, and we're in modern times, which we are, but there's still a lot of things that have not progressed. So
Mhm.
Yeah, because
so
if they
gosh, I mean,
did, I
yeah.
would have my job, right?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I could get just so meta with this concept, but I want to bring it back to, this idea of a healthy workplace. What disrupts a healthy workplace? And in the US, we're facing a burnout crisis. We hear about this in the data and the research. We know that post COVID, um, you know, mental health has been plummeting in many different facets. And I firmly believe the workplace has a huge role in understanding this epidemic, really, of burnout, of loneliness. There are things that are cropping up that are becoming real public health issues. For example, nearly 3 in 5 US workers report negative impacts of work related stress on their motivation, their energy, their levels of effort at work. So this is not just like, obviously this is a problem from a public health perspective, but it's a problem for employers to say
Mhm.
like people are not coming to work with the same level of energy because there might be something in the system that's causing them to burn out or to have long periods of lack of motivation. So how do we get past the superficial, I guess, a superficial solution for this very big problem? Maybe Lisa, you go first this time.
Yeah, well, I go back to, because this notion of burnout is super interesting to me, and this was, I believe, in 2021, Josh Bersin came out with this research around burnout, right, and the burnout crisis, and there was just this giant aha moment for me in reading that work, which was, it's not an organizational, excuse me, it's not an individual problem to
Mm-hmm.
solve, right? It's an organizational problem, because you can take even a 2 week vacation, right, which could feel glorious, and you come back and then that shine of vacation glow is exfoliated so quickly, right? You're like, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even just take 2 weeks off, because you're coming back to the same environment, right? So it's so simple when you think of it like that. It's like, oh, I went and I let the air out and I'm coming back refreshed, but I'm coming back into the same old grind. So this
Mm-hmm.
is where it's got to change. And that is why I strongly believe it is the role of the organization and the employer to figure that out beyond, hey, go meditate and here's a calm app.
Right.
What is it systemically in those
Mm.
systems that will shift it? Because that's where it is. I mean, it isn't, otherwise it's like the band-aid on the dam, right? And it's just going to ooze and fly off at,
Mm-hmm.
at
Yep.
any juncture. So yeah, I don't have the solution, sadly, but I do know that there's something that organizations have to figure out. And Jenna, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how that bubbles up to resilient, healthy teams.
Yeah, I think there's an important and I mean there's multiple ands to all of this because I think there is a responsibility that employers have by design in our country for their employees, and what that has looked like has evolved over time, and the social contract between employer and employee has evolved perhaps beyond a tipping point, right? And I think there's this notion that employers give and they look to tangibles to give, right? Like how can I round out my benefits package? What can I make available to people here so that they can be, right? As if it's a single solution is going to work for everyone, right?
Mm.
And two, that it's all that kind of tangible and transactional. I would say it's much more relational. And with the relationship, it's two-sided, right? I think that there is an element where, um, yes, an employer needs to provide, and an employee needs to take up and needs to speak up. Now, in
Mm-hmm.
order to speak up, a lot needs to exist, right,
Yes.
within that ecosystem. And that is where I think the inclusive and resilient leaders matter.
Mm-hmm.
Creating spaces and multiple ways in which people can voice what they need to thrive, what it means for them to reset, how feedback happens in all directions so that,
Mm-hmm.
right, they can be held to account and the people around them are held to account, so that that's kind of combination of space and grace and humanity can still exist, right? Like you look at some of the ways in which we've approached benefits, right? And all of the different things that are out there, like the number of apps and the number of platforms and the additional, what's kind of on trend right now that's going to allow me to attract and retain talent that's different from what's happening left and right. So many of those things are now expected across that there's little room really for employers to play with as far as differentiators. The differentiators are your people, right? The differentiators are the people that you have leading teams and bringing the best out of people that you have hired them for, both their skills and expertise, but also their energy and their work ethic and their way of being in
Mm-hmm.
the workplace. All of those things contribute to that much, dare I say, more than what your benefits
Mm-hmm.
package looks like on paper, right? Because, the other thing is the investment in that, the ROI is hard to measure, but very often you're making things available and the uptake is low, right? And so then what? Do you just like throw your hands up as an employer and say, I tried, I made it available, they didn't do it? Well, maybe they didn't do it because it's not what they needed, or that's not really what the problem is that needs solving. The problem is being seen. The problem is feeling a sense of mattering and adding
Mm-hmm.
value in the work that they're doing. So I do think that there's this opportunity for like the broader system structures to help, um, leaders and colleagues show up for one another in a way that matters. And perhaps it's, hey, like, what do you need to recharge? And what is it that causes high stress for you? Because something that causes stress for me can energize Leesa,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank God for
And
that,
what
by the
a, like,
way, right?
thank God for that. Oh my Lord. If I had to like execute in the way that Leesa just like grinds stuff out, high quality, without kind of any question, I would burn out. Like that's not where I thrive and
Mm-hmm.
where I can do my best work. I need it though. For my team
Yes.
to deliver, for us to feel connected, for us to have an impact, I need it all. And I can't do it all. So the brilliance of relationship in uncovering what those complementary energy givers and suckers are for each of us,
Mm-hmm.
that creates wellness, right? Like that creates a sense of balance, whatever that means.
Yeah, right.
Right, but
Balance.
it's in that. And what is the role of the organization in that? The role of the organization in that is to not look at any of that as soft or a waste of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The role of the organization in that is to be genuinely curious, to know and engage your people, like your most critical asset in the organization, and to also hold them to account for giving into like contributing to the environment that helps set them up for success, creating space for different ways that people need to be set
Mm-hmm.
up for success, and recognizing that it's not about providing solutions for everyone like bespoke, but creating space where people can find solutions for themselves that are
Mm-hmm.
bespoke, that don't get in your way of delivering as a broader team or organization.
Yeah, I love what you both just said. And to add just a few thoughts that came up for me is one, I think we sometimes think about burnout as doing too much, right? Like
Yes.
lots on the plate, workload, but in some cases it's actually doing not enough that is aligned with our zone of genius.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not doing it's doing things even in moderation, or even if your workload is not, if your plate is not full and you're doing things that are not aligned with your values, they're soul sucking. Jenna, to your point, it's work that it feels like AI could do it, like
Mm,
all of these things, and that is an ongoing narrative within the human condition, right? Like it's not static.
Mm-mm.
So what my zone of genius is today or next week or next year, like this, that's the point of, I think, the team based or the leader based conversations that need to happen around like what's going on in your life that is shaping that, what's
Yes.
energizing you. And because we are complex human beings, like we have to know that's going to ebb and flow. And if nobody is at the helm of bringing that out in people as far as their potential, one of the things that drives me absolutely wild is when I talk to leaders and we talk about them doing one-on-ones, for example, and I hear leaders say, oh, I have this like high performer on my team and I don't meet with her frequently because she's doing her thing, like I know she's out there, she doesn't need me. And it's like no, you're a high performer, like you are losing performance and potential if you're not meeting with them and hyping them up and energizing them and connecting them and powering the power source, which is the person.
Mm.
But many people think, oh, I don't need to talk to my high performers because they've got high autonomy, they're doing their thing. And so yes, every person needs a power source. And that's usually like other people, and it's social networks, and it's community, and it's all these things that are just so human that we haven't actually built into traditional organizational structures, to your point, Jenna, of it's like, it's not soft stuff. It's like these are nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
what drives performance and motivation and engagement within an organization.
Angela, I had a mentor. This is probably close to 15 years ago. And I was at a completely different point in my life in terms of what my kids needed, what that meant I could bring to work, kind of all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying something to him like, you work too much, right? You're always on. And he said, in the way that he does, in his very sage voice, he just said, "Oh, Leesa, balance isn't this, right? Balance can be this, it can be this, it can be this, but it's balanced, right? And balance for you is not balance for me." And it shifted. I got it. I got it in that moment. And I think about that same kind of balance when we're thinking, talking about whether it's being too busy or being just busy enough, but on the things that are soul sucking, or the benefits that we talked about. And, you can't have something for everyone. And I don't know that I fully agree with that. Like, there's part of me that's like, even when something um, has a low interest, or there's only a few people taking, those people feel really seen. And when we think about
Yes.
the breadth of people and different needs that are in an organization, I don't know, if there's 10 people saying this, I'll just take the benefit as an example, gender affirming care, it might not be that many people. Maybe it's 4 people that are using it, and there are 150 people using pet insurance, right? But they're like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
these are my kids. People
Yes.
feel seen and valued. And we know when that happens, magic can occur, right? Because they are
Yes.
willing to do the thing.
Well, and with that, Leesa, I totally agree. And I think when I mentioned before about, being everything to everyone, I think there's ways where creating access to things that a portion of your population need, care about,
Mm.
is important to them, again, in this life phase, in the way that they are living their
Yeah.
life, right, which is different for all of us, to your point. By making it available, you're making a statement, right? You're saying that
Yes.
we know that there are people who care about, need, want, aspire for different things, and we're going to make all of that available. And the cost benefit or the ROI doesn't necessarily have to make sense in black and white or in
Yeah.
arithmetic, right? Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay, because we believe in this, and we know that by creating this system, and creating access to these resources, we're setting up members of our team to contribute to the teams and the team of teams that they're on for
Right.
success,
Yes.
right? And to be energized while doing it, to have something taken care of that helps them be whole, right? And that matters to us, right? And the same thing can be said from a career development standpoint, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
not everyone,
Absolutely.
I mean, as loud as the people who want promotions are, many people don't. They're good. They're like steady, consistent,
Mm-hmm.
expected. I know what I give, I know what I get, and I'm like, sounds great. You want those people, and you need those people in your organization. And you also need those high performers who are constantly after the next thing. Now you have to manage their expectations that there might not always be a
Mm-hmm.
next thing, right? Like, at their
Mm-hmm.
fingertips. But the visibility and line of sight to what career development can look like. Those people who want steady, it doesn't mean they don't want to learn and grow. It doesn't mean that they don't care about their
Mm-hmm.
professional identity. It doesn't mean that they're not eager and willing and strong performers. Most of them, if not all of them, absolutely are. They want for different things, and it could be a stage of life thing. It could just be where they're rounding out and putting their livelihoods and their enrichment of self through other things outside of the workplace. Gosh darn it, good for them, right? Like,
Yeah.
the world needs
Mm-hmm.
that too, a lot of it. So how you create those and make tangible those structures of
Mm.
seeing people for all that they're giving in general, beyond the work walls, beyond the work hours, beyond their work hat, um, matters a lot. And
Hmm.
and knowing that as an employee that I have time and energy to give on the other side of my day to a cause or a community or a family member that I care deeply
Hmm.
about, that's important too. And an employer and a boss and a team has a role to play in that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The thing that comes to mind, and I think you both provide a really nice balanced perspective on this, right? Which is, and the way that I like to describe this, or at least in my head, the way that it's forming is, I think the best way for a leader of an organization or someone who's thinking about this conversation we're having and saying, okay, how do I, like, I know I can't make everybody happy, right? Like, let's just be real. Like, it's very hard to like personalize solutions for each individual. But what I think we can do is say, what is the dominant narrative?
Mm,
What is the dominant narrative that has seeped into the organization? And also knowing how that dominant narrative can impact marginalized people, historically marginalized people in the workplace, people who, and when I say that, that can be so many intersections, right? Working
Of
mothers,
course.
working parents, all of the things. There's so many intersections, and actually, those intersections probably at this point outweigh the dominant narrative, right? Which the dominant narrative
mhm,
is like, you work 9 to 5. There's potentially only a certain set of benefit options that don't meet everyone's needs. I think we really need to question those things and say, you know what, there's some young people who are entering the workplace and saying, I want like the minimum health benefits, but I'd rather have these other things, right? Like these feel like perks to me. So I think to me that the core is choice. You can
Mhm.
create systems of choice without creating many different pockets of solutions, if that makes sense, right? Like
mhm,
there are so many technology providers now that are coming out with this idea of, in this category you've got three choices, right? You can either have pet insurance, I don't know, uh, pet leave, or XYZ, right? There's so many different options. And so I mean, some of these things are seen as perks, right? But some of them are seen as like, this is necessary for me to live a quality life. Like gender affirming care is something you absolutely should be providing within, especially if you have a big community of LGBTQIA plus, especially if you have a larger workforce where that benefit is going to be needed. And again, it can be a choice that is
mhm,
provided. So I think we sometimes like
mhm,
mesh together things that are like needed for lifestyle and quality of life and perks. And I
mhm,
think we have to think about what is the dominant narrative here, and why are we so stringent on the box that
Mm.
people can choose from? Let's widen it. And I think sometimes that doesn't require additional monetary value all the time. Sometimes it's just about creating choice.
Systems of choice. I'm making the bumper sticker as we speak because I love that. I don't know. I'm gonna
Mm,
borrow that. I don't know what for yet, but there's
I love it.
something that is
Yes.
very interesting to me about that systems of choice.
When
Mm.
we talk about, development, right? Or, we're going to have, and I'm going to shout out Naomi because she's going to be one of the participants at the Culture Impact Lab. But she works on her platform is around leaving well. How do you have employees? And this is something that I'm fascinated about because we don't
yeah.
have people leave organizations well.
Right.
We, the layoffs, the reduction in force, like, or just somebody whose their job is eliminated, or if I'm leaving an organization, like how do we create systems of choice in that phase of the life cycle to say,
Yes.
how do we leave with dignity and respect? We
And
don't
what
do
does
that
that
well.
mean to you in this moment, right? Like
Exactly.
to not make an
Exactly.
assumption about that.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want a quiet exit.
Yes. Like, I don't want the big announcement. I just want to talk to like my key stakeholders and people I work with. And yeah, absolutely.
You know, yeah, I love this notion of, and broader concept of kind of systems of choice that give the give the opportunity for employers to see, right,
Mm-hmm.
and create access to
Mm-hmm.
the resources. I agree. The perks word is always,
Yeah.
um, I don't know, a perk for one person is a
Yep.
need for someone else potentially,
Yes.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a little charged, but I think that you creating access to and
Yes.
a means to access it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and recognizing too that an employer can't be everything to you, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
choice of what we can provide as an employer, and then that might inform choice that you make as on your own, right, to
Mm-hmm.
complement that in a way that makes sense for you, um, and that then allows for people to show up in that zone of genius, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
to when you have those weights lifted, or um, the insurances that give you peace of mind, and for things that, again, that matter to you now, and also the notion that we were talking about earlier is allowing for it, and allowing for and celebrating the fact that it's dynamic, right? Some elements of this are dynamic literally week to week, right? Other elements are phase of life,
Mm-hmm.
or an occurrence that's out of your control, that then informs what is needed and wanted and required for um, you to show up in that zone as often as
Mm-hmm.
possible. And all of this is in service of, I mean, the beauty of all of this is that it's in service of both the individual human experience that we all deserve, right, to have, to be using our energy and our gifts and our connections and our relatedness for in service of something, right? And it impacts company performance and business performance, right? That, for better or for worse, does have a role in making this world go around, right? So whether that's you're working
Mm-hmm.
towards a critical mission, of a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit or NGO, or you're working for a company who is contributing to the ecosystem as it is, all of it matters, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's when we create space and give grace to the humans that are in the workplace, amazing things happen.
Mm. Well, gosh, we covered so much. I could talk to you both for at least 3 more hours on this topic because it's so, every time we like dig into a pocket of this, I get
Yeah,
really excited, and I feel like systems of choice I think has to be something we operationalize somehow, because I do think there is a way to ingrain it into the employee life cycle.
for
And
sure.
it hits on mattering, it hits on autonomy, dignity, it hits on all these things that point to, I think, the role of the workplace in saying this is a partnership. This is not a
Mhm.
parentification, which I think
Mhm.
oftentimes we've like I think
Yes,
the workplace has viewed themselves as like some sort of parental figure to employees, and we know best, and you're our employee, not the other way around. There's a power dynamic. And so this idea of leveling out the partnership is something I feel very passionate about
hmm,
because it's important when it comes to topics like mattering. So let's continue to explore this. I know we're going to have lots of time in the lab in a few weeks to dig in and to operationalize this into something that you all can use in your work and the work you're doing with clients. But just as we're wrapping up, any last thoughts? And then how can people reach out to you if they're listening and saying, oh my gosh, I have to work with Leesa and Jenna or leader, like they're speaking my language, like this is something I need to connect with. How can we get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way to reach out is, I would say, via LinkedIn, or email, which is my first dot last name at leader, with the three as the second E. Um, and a closing thought, I guess, I think that with that lens of, in like, what the role of the workplace and the role of the employee, and knowing that there's it it is a relationship, right? And there's an opportunity for that leveling to occur. It's like there's a bit of this that needs to happen, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we as employees need to rise to the occasion with respect and vulnerability and
Mm-hmm.
accountability. And I think
Yes.
employers need to create those spaces, those structures that can liberate and that can create that
Mm.
space for candor and vulnerability, so that everyone can come into the workplace with a high level of value and dignity and the amount of connection they want, with the relationship to work that they want, while delivering for the organization's outcomes, and doing it with a sense of high purpose and value, whatever that means to them. So I'm excited to continue this conversation. There's so many layers, but looking forward to it continuing in just a couple of weeks. Leesa, how about you?
I think the thing that's coming to me is because I'm still noodling on systems of choice, is that this is not binary with like most things, right? It's not this or this, right?
Yeah.
And, Angela, to your point around, the box, like, why do we have to wrangle it? It doesn't have to be this or this only. And so that's where my mind is right now. So that's for another podcast, Angela. But for sure, yeah, I think what I would like to understand as we go to the lab here in a couple weeks, I'm very eager to see how the conversation unfolds from that perspective. And our people that will be in that
Mm-hmm.
room, are they feeling that, or is there still, that want to, like, no, because this I can manage this if it's here. Right? How do I do that? And so just I'm eager to hear a little bit more about where people's mindsets are.
Yeah, I'm really excited for us to bring this to the next level. Thank you both so much for your time, for your support of us at Call for Culture. I think there's just going to be such fantastic work that manifests from these conversations and for us being together in the same room in just a few weeks. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Angela. It was good to see
Thanks
you.
for having us.